Alright, Title CFR 49, Federal Road Administration dot, so, Part 234, Subpart E, Emergency Notification System, Telephonic Reporting Unsafe Conditions at Highway Rail Grade Crossing. Definitions. Using this part, answering machine means either a device or voicemail system allowed the telephone caller to leave the recorded message report unsafe condition highway rail pathway grade crossing described in 234.303. And D, the railroad is able to retrieve the record message either remotely or on-site. Automated answering system means with the type of the answering system that is direct, and telephone caller signal means for the operation for the caller with a choice for the selection for the available option for the report the unsafe condition highway railroad pathway grade crossing is described in 234.303. C and D with the immediate with after selecting one of the available menu option for the caller is transfer to the telephone operator. Our Class 2, Class 3 have the main with assigned with the regulations for the Transportation Board, Title 49 CFR Part 21201, General Instruction 111, as of the regulation revised apply with the order of the Board, including modification class thresholds based on the revenue deflator adjustments. Dispatch for the train and dispatch is trained. The means for the dispatch otherwise provided by the authority of movement of the train and train through the highway rail pathway grade crossing. Dispatching railroad means the railroad is dispatching otherwise provided by the authority of the movement of one or more trains through the highway rail or pathway grade crossing. Emergency notification system means the system in place by which the railroad receives, processes, or responds to telephone reports of an unsafe condition with a highway rail and pathway grade crossing. Emergency notification system includes the following components: the sign plate for the maintain with the grade crossing displayed, information necessary for the public to report unsafe condition of the grade crossing, dispatching railroad with the telephone, method that the railroad used to receive the process of the telephone reporting with the unsafe condition, and remedial action with the railroad take for the address of the report with the unsafe condition, for the record keeping conducted by the railroad to respond with the report with the unsafe condition for the grade crossing. The ENS stands for the Emergency Notification System defined in section. Form of the grade crossing means a farm grade crossing means the type of the highway grade crossing where a private road from the use for the movement of the farm, motor vehicles, farm machinery, or livestock in connection with the agricultural pursuit with forestry and land production. The purpose of the crossing is one or more railroad tracks. The grade highway rail pathway grade crossing means the highway grade crossing, the pathway grade crossing, highway rail pathway grade crossing means either the highway rail grade crossing, pathway grade crossing, maintained grade railroad means the e.g. track owner or leaser is responsible for the maintenance of the highway and pathway grade crossing. Warning device maintenance of the aspect of the highway rail pathway grade crossing and maintenance responsibility is handled by a contractor such as the maintaining the grade crossing warning system of the track structure of the highway rail pathway grade crossing, and then contractor is considered to maintain railroad purpose of the subpart pathway grade crossing means the path of which would cross one or more railroad track that is explicitly authorized by the public authority of the railroad, dedicated with the use of the non-vehicular traffic, including pedestrians, bicycles, or others not associated with the public highway, railroad, or street with a private roadway. Public report warning system malfunction. Public report warning system malfunction. Highway rail grade crossing means with the report with the contained specific information regarding a warning system malfunction. Highway grade crossing supplied with the railroad visa and emergency notification system by a member of the public design belonging to one of the categories individuals listed defined in the definition of credible report warning system malfunction with credible report system the malfunction at the highway grade crossing and statute 34.5. Third-party telephone services means that the service will receive the telephone reports unsafe condition, highway rail pathway grade crossing on behalf of the railroad. The railroad telephone with service of the receive of the reports on behalf of the dispatching railroad is only the entity between the receipt of the report with the telephone caller and the transmission of the report with the dispatching record with a third party of the telephone service will receive the report on behalf of the maintaining railroad is on the entity between the receipt of the report, dispatching railroad, the transmission report with the maintained railroad. Warning system failure of the pathway grade crossing means the failure of the active pathway grade crossing warning system of the performance intended. Your emergency notification system of the telephonic report with the unsafe condition of the highway rail pathway grade crossing. Duty of the dispatching railroad general. Each of the railroads shall establish and maintain a full free telephone service in which of the railroads each directly and promptly each receive the telephone calls from the public reporting the specific information about the condition listed in the paragraph C of the section with respect to the highway grade crossing, paragraph D of the section with respect to the pathway grade crossing through which the railroad dispatched for the train expect for this paragraph and paragraph B and E with the section impact statute 234.306 for the dispatching railroad to either have the live person with the answer directly or promptly with the automated answering system for the third-party telephone service with the purpose of receiving reports of pursuant to the section XM provided in paragraph B of the section Alright, B. Exemption for the certified railroad. If the dispatching railroad is in accordance with either of the conditions set forth in paragraph of the railroad is not subject to the general duties stated last sentence for the paragraph A of the section. If the railroad is, 1. If the railroad dispatches one more of the train through the highway rail path grade crossing, each of which for the authorized for the travel through crossing speed not greater than 20 miles per hour, the railroad may use the answering machine to receive the calls regarding unsafe conditions for the such crossing. If using the answering machine, and pursuant to this paragraph, the railroad must retrieve this message immediately prior to the start of its operation each day. If the railroad dispatches one or more train with the highway rail grade pathway grade crossing the seasonal intermittent basis for the tours and bi-weekly service the non-24-hour service any with the trains authorized to travel with it through the crossing at the speed of greater than 20 miles per hour with the railroad more than not answering the received regarding the unsafe condition for the such crossing only during the hours of the non-operation is using the answer presumed the answering machine presumed the paragraph D of the period of the non-operation railroad must retrieve its message daily. However, the railroad must retrieve its message immediately prior to the start of the operation for the day. During the hours of operation, dispatching railroad shall have either the live person answer for the calls directly with a promptly automated answering system employed with a third-party telephone service in accordance with the paragraph A of the section to receive the reports regarding the unsafe conditions at the crossing through the dispatch of the trains. C. The reportable unsafe conditions of the highway rail grade crossing each railroad shall establish service presumed this paragraph A of the section except for the providing paragraph B and E of the section statute 234-306A with the receipt of the telephone cards regarding the following condition with respect to the highway grade crossing through the which the dispatcher train. 1. Warning system malfunction with the highway grade crossing and disable the vehicle with other vehicle obstruction and blocking the railroad track with the highway grade crossing and obstruction of the view of the pedestrian vehicle operated with the responsible distance or the either direction with the train approach with the highway grade crossing any information relating to the and other unsafe condition with the highway rail grade crossing. The reportable unsafe condition of the pathway grade crossing each railroad shall establish service the pursuant to paragraph A of the section except for the providing paragraph B and E of the section statute 234-306 for the receipt of the telephone calls regarding the following condition with respect to pathway grade crossing through which the dispatch of the train, the failure active of the warning of the system pathway grade system performed 10 with the obstruction blocking of the railroad track with the pathway grade crossing obstruction of the view of the pathway grade crossing user responsible distance in either direction of the train approach with the pathway grade crossing any information related to not otherwise unsafe condition with the pathway grade crossing class 2 class 3 railroads a class 2 class 3 railroad with the dispatch one or more of the train through the highway grade rail or pathway grade crossing within any area which we use with use of a non-toll-free number would not incur with an additional fee for the caller with a toll-free number would use the non-toll-free number to receive the call pursuant to paragraph A of the section regarding each of the crossing in the area. If reports not made by the through the emergency notification system, reports unsafe condition of the highway rail pathway grade crossing not made with the telephone service described in paragraph A of the section subpart E does not apply to the report. 235-305 remedial action response with the reports unsafe condition highway pathway grade crossing general rule of the response with the credible with the warning system malfunction highway grade crossing 1 if the highway railroad is credible with the part with the warning system malfunction the highway railroad grade crossing pursuant to 236-303 C1 with the railroad have the maintain responsibility of the system to which with the report with the pertaining shall take an appropriate action required with this part C with this part. If the railroad received the credible with the report with the warning system malfunction, the high grade crossing, and the pursuant with the statute 234-303C1 with the required dispatching responsibility of the crossing does not have the maintenance of the responsibility for the warning system to which it pertains to, shall promptly be contacted with all the trains that are authorized to operate through the highway grade crossing in an effort to notify the train crew with the reported malfunction prior to each of the trains arrival at the crossing after the contacting the appropriate train, but the railroad shall promptly contact the maintained railroader, inform the railroad reported malfunction. The maintaining the railroad shall take an appropriate action required with the part C of the part. General rule: the response of the public to the warning system malfunction in the highway grade crossing. If the railroad receives the public report with the warning system malfunction in the highway rail grade crossing pursuant to statute 234-303 EC1, the railroad shall maintain the responsibility of the warning system in which for the report pertaining to shall promptly contact all the trains authorized to operate through the highway grade crossing in an effort to notify the train with the crew reported malfunction prior to each of the trains, but at the crossing of the contacting of the appropriate trains reported shall be the prompt contact with the law enforcement agency jurisdiction over the highway grade crossing and provided with the necessary information for the law enforcement agency to direct the traffic and carry out the activities to maintain the safety of the highway grade crossing. The railroad shall promptly investigate the report, determine the nature of the malfunction, and take the appropriate action with the statute 234-307. 207, sorry. If the railroad receives a public report with a warning system malfunction, highway grade crossing the warning system pursuant to statute 234-303C1, but the railroad does not have the maintenance responsibility for the warning system of the highway grade crossing, shall promptly contact all the trains authorized to operate through the highway grade crossing to which of the report pertains to the effort of the notify the train crew with the reported malfunction prior to each of the train arrival to the crossing. After the contact appropriate train, the railroad shall promptly contact the law enforcement agency for the jurisdiction of other highway rail grade crossings. Crossing and provide with the necessary information for the law enforcement agency to direct traffic to carry out the other activities to maintain safety of the highway grade crossing. The railroad shall have promptly contact with the maintaining railroad, inform of the reported malfunction of the maintenance and railroad until the promptly investigated report determine the nature of the malfunction, take with appropriate action required in statute 234-307 or 207. General rule of the response part of the warning system failure with the pathway grade crossing of the railroad received the report of the warning system failure of the pathway grade crossing pursuant to 234-303D1 with the railroad. The maintenance is responsible for the warning system in which the report pertains to the railroad shall promptly contact all the trains that are authorized to operate through the pathway grade crossing in an effort to notify the train crew of the reported failure prior to each of the train arrival to the crossing. After contacting the appropriate train, the railroad shall have the promptly contact with the law enforcement agency and have the jurisdiction over the pathway crossing grade crossing provided with the necessary information for the law enforcement agency to direct traffic and other or carry other activities to maintain safety with the pathway of the grade crossing. The railroad shall have then promptly investigate the failure, investigate the report, determine the nature of the failure without undue delay with the repair of the active warning system if necessary. 2. If the railroad reports a report with a warning system failure for the pathway grade crossing pursuant to statute 234-303D1, but the railroad does not maintain the right and responsibility with the warning system with the report pertains to the railroad, which shall properly contact all of the trains that are authorized to operate through the pathway grade crossing to which of the report pertains to the effort to notify the train crew of the reported failure with each of the train arrival to the crossing. After the contacting the appropriate train of the railroad shall promptly contact with the law enforcement agency through the jurisdiction over the pathway grade crossing to provide necessary information for the law enforcement agency to direct the traffic to carry out the activity to maintain safety of the pathway grade crossing. The railroad shall then promptly contact with the maintaining of the railroad and inform of the report of the failure of the maintaining the railroad shall use the promptly investigation of the report to determine the nature of the failure without the undue the repair of the warning system if necessary. The general rule of the response for the reporting of a disabled vehicle or other obstruction blocking the railroad track on the highway pathway grade crossing. If the railroad receives the report of the disabled vehicle or other obstruction blocking the railroad track for the highway rail pathway grade crossing pursuant to statute 34303C2 and D2 or D2, and the railroad has the maintenance responsibility for the crossing with a report pertaining with this railroad shall promptly contact all the trains authorized to operate through the crossing in the effort to notify train crews that shall be reported obstruction prior to each of the trains' arrival at the crossing. After containing the appropriate train of the railroad shall promptly contact the law enforcement agency to have the jurisdiction over the crossing to provide them with the information necessary to assist the removal of the reported track of the obstruction that will carry out the activity to maintain safety of the crossing, and the railroad shall then promptly investigate the report, determine the nature of the obstruction without undue delay with the necessary action that have the obstruction removed. If the railroad receives a report or a disabled vehicle or other obstruction blocking the railroad at a highway pathway grade crossing pursuant to statute 234-303C2 or D2, if it does not maintain for the responsibility crossing to which the report pertains to the railroad shall promptly contact all the trains authorized to operate through the crossing in which the report pertains in an effort to notify the train crew of the reported obstruction prior to each of the trains' arrival to the crossing of the connection. And after contacting the appropriate train of the railroad shall have promptly contact the law enforcement agency with the jurisdiction over the crossing to provide it with the information with the necessary to assist with the removal of the reported track obstruction or to carry out other activities to maintain safety of the crossing. The railroad shall then promptly contact with the maintaining of the record of the form of the obstruction. The maintaining of the railroad shall promptly investigate the report, determine the nature of the obstruction without undue delay, take necessary action to have the obstruction removed. Special rule with containing with a train that is not required to have the communication equipment. If the railroad is not required to have by statute 229, but the chapter to have the working wireless communication occupied with the controlling locomotive of the train, the railroad surfaces a report pursuant to 234-303C1, C2, D1, or D2 by the highway rail grade crossing of the train is authorized to operate with the railroad shall promptly contact with the occupied control locomotive of the train is required in paragraph A, B, and C, and D of this statute 234-305. the quickest means available consistent with the statute 22013A of the chapter. General rule of the responsible report of the obstruction review of the highway, rail, and pathway grade crossing upon the receipt of the pursuant to statute 234.303C3 or D3 with the railroad, if the both dispatching with the maintaining the railroad shall timely investigate the report, remove the obstruction if it's lawful and feasible to do so. If the dispatcher of the railroad is not maintaining the railroad, it shall promptly contact the maintaining the railroad, which shall time investigate with the report, remove the obstruction lawful and feasible to do so. General rule of the responsible report of the unsafe condition of highway, rail, path, grade crossing upon receipt of the report pursuant to the statute 334.303C4 and or D4 related to maintenance with the crossbuck sign with other similar grade with the cross safety device, any other safe condition that such as a pothole could cover the injury or the damage not covered in paragraphs A, B, or C with the statute 234.305 of the railroad is both the dispatching and the maintaining of the railroad. It shall timely investigate with the report of the railroad find that the unsafe conditions exist. They shall timely correct with lawful if feasible to do so. With the dispatching railroad is maintaining the railroad. It shall timely inform the maintaining of the railroad. Shall timely investigate the report of the maintaining of the railroad find that the unsafe conditions exist. It shall timely correct it if it is so. If it is lawful and feasible to do so. General rule of maintaining the railroad's responsibility with receiving the reports on safe condition, highway, rail, pathway, grade crossing, and in general the dispatching railroad is required under the section contact with the maintaining the railroad safe shall provide the dispatching railroad with sufficient contact information which the dispatching railroad may timely contact with the maintaining the railroad upon receipt of the report, and have either live person answer the call directly or promptly used with an automated answering machine for the purpose of receiving all of the call of the dispatching railroad with the report with an unsafe condition except for the provided in paragraph B, H2 of the section. 2. Exemption 3 for the third party of the telephone service answering the machine, but maintaining the railroad. If the maintaining the railroad is responsible for maintaining for the highway, the pathway, grade crossing through the which for the railroad dispatch with one more trains each for the authorized to travel through the crossing of the way with speed not greater than 20 miles per hour. With the maintaining the railroad may use for the third party telephone service in accordance with the statute 234.307 the answering machine with the receive the reports of the dispatching railroad over the unsafe conditions such as the crossing of the use of the answering machine pursuant to this paragraph. If the railroad must retrieve the messages immediately prior to the start of the operation of the day, if the maintained with the railroad with the responsible maintenance for the highway, pathway, grade crossing on the seasonal intermittent with the base for the bi-weekly service on 9-24-hour service with the maintaining the railroad may be used in third party telephone service in accordance with the statute 234.307 over the answer machine with the receive the report of dispatching railroad unsafe conditions such as for the crossing if using answer for the machine pursuant to the paragraph during the period of the non-operation for the maintenance day. Maintaining the railroad must retrieve the message as daily have with the railroad must retrieve the message immediately prior to the start of the operation for the day. That during the hours of operation, railroad should either have live person answer call directly to you the automated answering system to receive the reports regarding the unsafe conditions at such crossing. 234.306 multiple dispatching maintaining of the railroads with respect to the same highway, pathway, grade crossing appointment with the responsible railroad. Alright, A. The duty of the multiple dispatching of the railroad with the deployment of the primary dispatching of the railroad with the crossing one more with more of the railroad dispatching of the train throughout the same highway, rail, path, grade crossing. Dispatching railroad with the crossing shall appoint with one of the railroads to the primary dispatching of the railroad with the crossing of the brand such with the primary dispatching of the railroads with the crossing shall do the following. Provide the emergency telephone number of the railroad responsible for the placement of the names for the emergency notification system sign at the crossing. Receive all the reports for the emergency notification system or of the unsafe condition with the crossing of the required in statute 234.303. After receipt of the report with an unsafe condition crossing, the prompt have contacted all of the railroad with the dispatch for the train through the crossing and with warning them the report with unsafe condition with appropriate promptly contact with the maintained railroad for the crossing of the required by statute 234.305 and otherwise carry out the duties under the subpart of the dispatching of the railroad with the crossing with respect to the crossing. After receiving the report with the unsafe condition with the crossing with the appointed dispatcher of the railroad and each for the other dispatching railroads too within the respect pertained shall carry out the remedial action required with the statute 234.305 of the record keeping required in 234.313 due to multiple maintaining railroads appointed with the railroad responsible for placement made for the emergency notification sign with which one or more of the railroads maintained with the same crossing the maintained railroad with the crossing shall appoint with one of the railroads to be responsible for the placement made for the emergency notification sign with the crossing pursuant to 234.309 and 234.311. If the railroad appointed with under the paragraph B1 of the section shall display the emergency notification sign with the crossing emergency telephone number of the dispatching railroad with the crossing and then move more of the railroad dispatch for the train through the crossing of the emergency telephone number of the primary dispatching railroad shall the crossing identified under the paragraph A of the section duty over the multiple maintaining the railroad with respect to remedial action for the crossing, and whether there are multiple to maintain with the railroad for the crossing of the dispatching railroad, with the if and one more of the railroad dispatch for the train through the crossing primary to dispatching of the railroad for the crossing of the under paragraph A of the section upon receipt of the report on safe conditions shall promptly contact the inform of the appropriate to maintain with the railroad for the crossing of the report of the problem, each for the maintain with the railroad for the crossing receive of the report on safe condition and crossing pertaining with the maintain for the responsibility of the crossing using the maintaining railroad shall carry the ultimate out with the railroad remedial action required in statute 234-305 and the record keeping required in statute 234-313. 234-307 using the third party telephone service for the dispatching and maintenance of the railroad. Generally using a third party telephone service for the dispatching of the railroad. The dispatching railroad may use a third party telephone service to receive the reports of unsafe conditions of the highway rail pathway grade crossing pursuant to statute 234-303 with the dispatching railroad chief of the third party telephone service. The third party telephone service shall be reached directly and promptly the telephone number to display on the emergency notification sign with the pursuant to statute 234-309. The telephone third party telephone service that may be used for the automated answering system purposes of the receiving of such report to the dispatcher railroad shall have the live person annual calls answer the calls directly promptly from the third party telephone service unless permitted pursuant to statute 234-303b to use an answering machine. The dispatching railroad shall ensure that the third-party telephone service comply with the applicable requirements of 234-307. General use of the third-party telephone service to maintain the railroad pursuant to 234-305H2 for the maintaining the railroad, either maintaining the highway, rail, or pathway grade crossing the seasonal intermittent the base of the tourist, the bi-weekly service of the 9 service, the 24-hour service, the crossing through the work of the railroad, dispatch for the one or more train for the each van over the which for the authorized to travel each for the crossing of the speed not greater than 20 miles per hour. May the third-party telephone service with the receive of the report unsafe condition for the crossing of the dispatching rail with the third-party telephone service that may be the automated answering system for the purpose of receiving such report to maintain the report received of the reports for the third party for the telephone service by either having a live person answer the calls directly and promptly using the answer machine. If the answer machine pursuant to the paragraph of the railroad must be using the answer machine in accordance with the statute 234-305H2, the maintaining the railroad shall serve the third party telephone service to comply with the applicable requirements of statute 234-307. Alright, due to the third-party telephone service, the contacting, dispatching, and maintaining the railroads, either the receiving of the report with pursuant to 234-303-305 with the behalf of either the dispatch railroad maintaining the railroad, respectively, the third-party telephone service shall immediately contact the railroad at a minimum provide with the following information: the nature of the report on the unsafe condition, the location of the unsafe condition, including the U.S. national crossing inventory number, the crossing, the whenever the report, person reporting the unsafe condition, railroad employee with law enforcement officer, highway traffic official, the employee, public agent acting with the official capacity, the date and the time of the report with the receipt of the third-party telephone service. Additional information provided with the caller may be the use full for the restoring of the crossing of the safe condition duty of the railroad use of the third-party telephone system. If the dispatcher maintain the railroad use of the third-party telephone service to receive the report of the unsafe condition of the highway, rail, path, grade crossing the railroad shall 1. Provide the third-party telephone service with sufficient contact over the information of the third-party telephone service. The service immediately can contact the railroad with the upon receipt of the rail report. The FRA informing the FRA before the implementation of such service the railroad in intent with the use of the third-party telephone service to provide with the FRA with the contact information for the third-party telephone service. The information identified with the highway, rail, pathway, grade crossing about the third-party telephone service with the receipt of the reports. And 3. Inform the FRA with written within 30 days of filing any change for the use of the discontinuing the third-party telephone service to take an appropriate action required in statute 234-5. That should be used for the contact with third-party telephone service about the report. Either third-party telephone service and railroad responsible if the railroad used the third-party telephone service to receive the reports pursuant to the statute 234-303 or 234-305. The third-party telephone service is responsible for carrying out the to the section of the recorder with the keeping under the statute 234-313 with the end of the applicable to 234-315 with an addition with the railroad means the responsible for the action on mission with the third-party telephone service is utilize to violate provisions section under the record keeping requirements of 234-313 and under the 234-315. Emergency notification signal and signs in general. Provision for the information of the dispatching railroad with the maintaining the railroads that are not some entity with the dispatch railroad with the highway rail with the path of grade crossing such as shall be provided with the maintaining railroad with the telephone number that is displayed with the emergency notification signal sign at the crossing no later than 100 calendar days before the day of the implementation of the emergency notification system is required. Information for the display in each of the emergency notification system sign located on each of the highway and pathway grade crossings required in Statute 234.311 shall display the necessary information for the dispatching railroad with the receipt of the report on safe condition for the crossing. The information for the minimum includes the following: the toll-free telephone number or non-telephone toll-free telephone number provided with the Statute 234.303E with the establishment and proceed with the reports pursuant to the Statute 234.303A with an explanation for the purpose of the assignment of the report agency with the problem to blank and the U.S. Department of the National Crossing Inventory number the sign to that crossing. Signs inside of the other physical feature of each of the emergency notification system shall measure with at least 12 inches wide with 9 inches high, be the retro-reflective, have legible text, letters, numerals, minimum characters, height of the inch of the information required in paragraph B of this section. Have a white text on the blue background with a white border, except for the USA National Crossing Inventory number of the black text of the unset on the white rectangular background. 234.311 the emergency notification signals placement and maintenance. The number of the signs of the highway, pathway, grade crossing in general will maintain the railroad appointed pursuant to the Statute 234.306B with the highway, rail, and pathway grade crossing shall base for the maintaining the sign on each of the appropriate to the crossing of the form with the Statute 234.309 with each of the provided with the paragraph A2 of the section. Exemption of the farm grade with the crossing the responsible shall place for the maintain a minimum of the one time with the conform to the Statute 234.309 at the crossing. At a railroad yard or port of the dock facility that does not meet the definition of plant railroad of the Statute 234.5 with the responsible for the railroad shall play for the maintain a minimum of one time with each of the vehicle or inch of the yard of the port of the dock facility in accordance with the Statute 234.309 in lieu of the place for the sign of each crossing within the yard of the port of the dock facility. Each of the sign must be placed in the clear visible with the driver of the motor vehicle located with the vehicle or entrance to the yard of the port dock facility. B. Placement of the sign. Each sign will require with the paragraph each of the A with the section located with the crossing exempt with the provided with the paragraphs A2 and the section and the maintained with the responsible for railroad of the sign. 1. Conspicuous to the user of the railroad. Conspicuous to the user of the roadway or pathway by the day and night. Does not obstruct any other sign with the traffic control device for the crossing. Does not limit the view of the train approaching the highway, rail, or pathway grade crossing. And 4. If mounted on the post, have the support for the crossworthy and breakaway yielding. 2. A sign placed in a single bungalow does not comply with the paragraph of the B11 of the section. Repair and replacement and emergency notification sign. If the emergency notification sign is required, the subpart to discover the responsible railroad missing damage of any of the other unusable vehicular and pedestrian traffic responsible for the railroad shall repair with the place of the sign so no later than 30 days calendar days from the time of the detection. 234.313 record keeping. In general, each of the records shall subject to some parts of the capital in accordance with the section records may be either in paper form or provided with the railroad with the electronic means for the manner of the form of the 234.315 dispatching railroad responsible for receiving the reports pursuant to the 234.303A the third-party telephone service responsible for receiving the reports pursuant to 234.307 if applicable each of the maintaining railroad shall be kept in a minimum of the following information for each of the report received them. The subpart, the nature of the report, unsafe condition, location of the highway, rail, path, grade crossing, the highway name, if applicable, the U.S. National Crossing Inventory number, the time and the day of the receipt of the report of the railroad, if applicable, whether the person provided with the report was railroad employee, law enforcement officer, tracking official, other employee of the public agency acting on an official capacity. 5. Actions taken by the railroad prior to the result of the reported unsafe condition, grading crossing the warning train crew, notifying the maintained railroad, contacting law enforcement, other public authorities. If reported unsafe conditions, substantiated actions taken by the railroad to remedy the report unsafe conditions as lawful and feasible at the time of the date with the report unsafe condition was remedied. If no remedy action was taken, the reason why, if the dispatching railroad with accordance with the Statute 234.305 is required to contact with the maintaining railroad, maintain the date and contact with the maintaining railroad, the records credible the reports of the warning system malfunction of the railroad with the maintenance responsibility over the warning device for the highway, rail, grade crossing maintains record with the pursuant to Statute 234.109 deemed to comply with the record keep with the requirements of subpart regarding the credible report of the warning system malfunctions. Alright, C. Records involved with the multiple dispatching maintaining the railroads where the multiple railroads dispatch through the dispatch train through the same highway, rail, and path grade crossing. The appointment on one railroad to receive the telephonic reports regarding the unsafe conditions such as crossing pursuant to 234.306 for the appointment must be recorded with written in a copy of the documentation retained and by each of the railroad duration of the appointment for 1 year, which for the period is longer. When the multiple railroads have the maintenance responsible for the same highway grade, rail, and path grade crossing, the appointment of one of the railroads to be responsible for the installing, maintaining the emergency notification sign for the crossing pursuant to 234-306 of the appointment must be recorded with written a copy of the documentation retained. Each railroad had for the duration of the appointment for 1 year, of which the period is longer.
I'm on the way down to the...
Alright. The record retention period. Records available to each railroad shall retain for at least 1 year for the latest of the railroad activity responsible for the report received under the subpart with all records referred to the paragraph A and B of the section. Records required to be kept under the subpart shall be made available to the FRA as provided in Title 49 U.S. Standard Code 20107. 234-315 electronic record keeping. If the railroad subject for the subpart maintains the records may acquired with the subpart with electronic format in lieu of the on paper system of the keeping of electronic records must be meet of the following conditions. The railroad adequate limits for control accessibility of the records retained with electronic data. The system will identify those individuals who have such access to the railroad over the terminal as the terminal with the location designated of the railroad as the general office of the railroad for the railroad system at each division headquarters. Each terminal each terminal has a computer and either fast-file machine with a printer with the connected with the computer to retrieve the produce the information with a usable format immediate with the review with the FRA representative of the railroad has designated the representative of the authorized again it retrieved the information from the electronic system with a true and accurate copy of the electronic cap of the record of the railroad provided the FRA representative with immediate access to the record the inspection copy of the during the normal business hour provide printing out of such records upon request if the record required by the subject subpart in the form of electronic record keeping. The electronic record keeping the system that does not comply with the paragraph A of the section of the report must be kept on paper. 234-317 compliance date. If the railroad without an emergency notification sign any of the kind of the railroad subject for the subpart does not have an emergency notification kind any kind with the place for the August 13th, 2012 of the railroad shall implement an emergency notification sign with the conform with the subpart no later than September 1st, 2015. Railroads not conform with the emergency notification system telephone service. The railroad subject the subject already has its own emergency notification system telephone service by using the third party emergency notification telephone service. Telephone service does not conform with the requirements of statute 234-303 and 234-307 respectively. August 13, 2012. The railroad shall comply with the subpart no later than March 1st, 2014 with the exemption paragraph C and D of the subpart 234-317. Railroad with the emergency notification system signs conforming side of the railroad subject with the subpart with the emergency notification sign within place with the signs does not conform to the requirements of statute 234-309 with the August 13, 2012. The railroad's emergency notification signs shall conform with the statute 234-309 no later than is required below. If the railroad sign is greater than or equal to 60 square inch of the height of the letter of the sign with a greater than or equal to 3/4 inch of the information required with the statute 234-309 B1 and B3 and greater than or equal to the 3/8 of an inch of the information required with the statute 234-309 B2 of the automated August 13, 2012 of the railroad with the maintained with the sign but is for its useful life. If the railroad sign is greater than or equal to 60 square inch of the height of the lettering is either 3/4 inch information required in the statute 233-309 B1 and B3 or B3 or less than 3/8 of an inch information required in 234-309 B2 of the August 13, 2012. The railroad sign must conform with the statute 234-309 no later than September 1st, 2017. If the railroad sign size is less than 60 square inches, regardless of the height of the lettering of the information required in the statute 234-309B of the August 13, 2012, railroad sign must be conformed with the statute 234-309 no later than September 1st, 2015. If the railroad chooses an emergency notification sign with a non-conforming sign with the before and applicable complying with the date of the state with the railroad shall replace with the sign with conforming with the statute 234-309. Or the railroads with the emergency notification signs have the non-conforming placement. If the railroad subject to the subpart of the road, the emergency notification sign is in place for the placement of the sign does not conform with the requirements of statute 234-311 and August 13, 2012. The placement of the railroad emergency notification shall conform with the statute 234-311 no later than September 1st, 2017. With the railroad change the placement of the sign with the before September 1st, 2017, placement of the sign must be conformed with 234-311. If the railroad placement of the sign before the September 1st, 2017, the sign conform with the statute 234-309, but the placement of the sign does not conform with the statute 234-311, and the railroad shall use also change the placement of the sign so that it conforms with the statute 234-311. E. Record keeping railroads for the non-conforming emergency notification signs. Record keeping the railroad subject for the subpart already conduct for the record as part of the emergency notification sign with the record keeping does not conform with the statute 234, 313, or 234, 315. The record keeping shall conform with the statute 234, 313, or 233, 234, 315 no later than March 1st, 2004. Alright, subpart F, highway, rail, and path, Great Cross inventory reporting.